To the way it is this morning, and my panel this very cold. Is it cold? I can't tell. The AC is on in here. It's cold in here. This very cold studio morning. Hassan Omar, the Mombasa senator, and Sudi Wandabusi, who is a lawyer. And that's where we're going to begin all across the newspapers last week. And it began with a very simple headline on Wednesday: Bill to fight terror limits basic rights. What do you guys think about this? Hassan, let's begin with you. I'm sorry I didn't ask you about your weekend.
The weekend was great. First, I need to mention that we've been asked what are the Mombasa leadership doing. So we've come together. We kick-started a tournament under the auspices of Haki Africa. It's I think one of the leading human rights organizations in Kenya, and 108 teams are participating. So they'll be busy all this Christmas break and December holidays. So next, and then we tend to have an even longer tournament come next year. But that is just one of the strategies. Yeah. We're trying to train people in terms of dealing with radicalization, in terms of dealing with violent extremism. And that's why exactly that the strategies just go beyond the purview of law. I keep talking about this, the UN strategy about combating terrorism, where the legal element is a very, just one element of the whole strategy in terms of fighting terrorism. You need to deal with the social ramifications, you need to deal with the political ramifications. And the UN strategy, like every other international strategy, is very unequivocal, that you do not derogate the constitution under the auspices of fighting terrorism. And I think what the Jubilee government has tried to do is through building what I call, I try to relate most circumstances with the little political science I know. We're building some kind of fascist, appetite or anger.
That is a very strong statement.
Because it is strong in this regard, because when people are trying to strongly derogate the constitution, we have no other ways to describe it apart from very strong, political analogy. So what you do is you create this ultra-nationalism based either on a country or on ethnicity. Because I was just looking at the papers and I saw Central and Rift Valley leaders support the bill. What experts are they in law? Apart from the fact that it's an ethnic, we've almost rearranged it to an ethnic and a coalition struggle.
Before we get into that conversation proper, let's find out what Sudi did over the weekend. So Hassan Omar is busy organizing tournaments that are targeting radicalized youth. What are you doing?
Yeah. I was busy enjoying my Jamhuri.
So like the rest of us, mortals.
Yes. I was busy enjoying and of course also looking at these proposed laws. Yeah, I can't say my weekend was as packed as Mheshimiwa's weekend. I must commend him. I like the Mombasa leadership, especially on not just this issue, but the way they are approaching generally the leadership. I like the teamwork that Mheshimiwa that the senator is having with the governor, which is very great. I'm just hoping that that county leadership will loop in all the ministers, I mean the MPs at the lower level in the county, because again it has been on the spot. And it still remains on the spot on a number of security matters, and probably that's why the senator really feels like it takes it so personal about this whole proposals. But then he has also mentioned that law is one, legal provisions are one of the ways of combating terror. And he does not say that it's not important. So they are important amendments. But then again, we must say that the amendments, like he has said, I concede that yes, they must be within the purview of the Constitution, and especially again considering the history we have gone through as a country. I know the fears may be real.
Okay, so why don't we begin there? And I'll begin by just looking at how the headlines have progressed throughout the week. So on Wednesday, the Daily Nation begins that story by saying the bill to fight terror limits basic rights. On Thursday, we are seeing a little bit more of that. The Daily Nation once again says Raila's party vows to block new police laws, and the Standard newspaper, shocking draconian laws in proposed bill on terror. Now, this is where it gets interesting. On Friday, it becomes more about politics than about the bill. Drama as MPs clash over new police laws. Row over terror laws turns into Uhuru Raila tussle, and that continues until through Saturday and Sunday. No surrender in war on terror, says Uhuru. These are no ordinary times, Uhuru says. Of course, this is coming against the back of what was happening over the weekend. But are we politicizing this issue too much already? Hassan, why don't we begin with you, because you've already been accused of being too much of a politician.
I'm not too much of a politician. I am too much of a human rights actor, because if you look at my discourse, it has been very categorical on human rights. And even as a politician, I came into the political space to try and anchor the human rights discourse within the realm of policy and law, and to ensure that that human rights language and culture becomes imbibed in the country's political framework. Secondly, I think there is no other way of doing it. We, the Jubilee Coalition and the Court Coalition, are two separate and distinct coalitions that have a different agenda, idea, vision of how to run this country. And I think what Jubilee is saying, you have to derogate rights to get your security. What Court is saying, you don't have to derogate rights, you have to uphold the Constitution as you work around your security. And therefore, I think, and if you look at the Court validation of this argument, in fact, Court has the issues around the constitutionality or otherwise have had a broader framework of actors coming into, wading into the debate, from local actors to international actors. CIC, all top lawyers in this country, including some of the biggest constitutional lawyers, Ahmed Nasir, Alish Guy, George Kigoro, you name them, every brand, international organization, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch. So, but if you look at the other side, there's William Ruto, Uhuru Kenyatta, Kindiki, Cecily Mbarire, just limited to a narrow section of a political class who's hanging on to a belief that is so erroneous, yet sorted, and did not see the levels of ridicule that they are subjecting themselves into. And I don't believe in this mass arena of ideas that just because we express our ideas in a political space means we're politicizing security. It means that's the only space that these ideas are contested, and where law and legislative life is given to legislative proposals. So I think in my own assessment, the Court is doing what Court must do. Court must defend the Constitution. Court has a separate and distinct value system from the Jubilee Coalition, its agenda. And if you look even at its composition, is the chemistry that brought the progressive human rights and democratic actors together. I can list for you, an endless list of luminaries of the democratic struggle in Court, where I'm literally in a dearth of even having the kinds of people I can make reference to in Jubilee, and the ones who I think we can make reference to, unless they decide to just do it for political purpose. In fact, they will be politicizing it. If, let's say today, Kiraitu Murungi stood up and said the laws are constitutional, then I'll have a problem. I will start saying, oh my God, that is politics.
Okay, but going back to the people that you've referred to, Kindiki Kithure, we heard him saying very powerfully that a very strong declaration that come Thursday, this law will be passed, with or without your input, with or without amendments. So surely, isn't this a show of power?
Kindiki, poor guy, is blinded by the arrogance of power. There's a whole country that can stop him if he gets that. He just can't deal with the will of the people of Kenya. And then that's why I've always believed the judiciary is the vanguard of our constitutional values and principles. I am confident, as I heard Nyachai say, our dear friend in the CIC, that this matter will ultimately be settled by the constitutional courts. This matter, this is a battle that will end in the judiciary. And what I have concerns about is the lack of color and texture and quality in terms of Jubilee's advancement of this goal. They should have been bringing all actors together. So they first split the political class. There's Court and there's Jubilee, and I'm appreciating Raila's extension of goodwill to Uhuru Kenyatta. Secondly, they're going to now go into a new debacle in terms of the Court debacle. And you've seen first, and secondly, they have polarized the political space. Central and Rift Valley is metaphorically the two ethnic groups, so to speak. Then now they polarize, the new space that will be polarized is the courts. The courts will throw away this amendment. And before you realize, rather than galvanize a country towards a common good to fight terrorism, they will have fractured it and bled it so much. And therefore, that's where now the loopholes, it gives the terrorists that comfort zone. They have looked at how they've polarized this nation. We must, in a debate that is literally threatening the values of the country. You say Al-Shabaab is vicious. but we are not Al-Shabaab as a country. So official Al-Shabaab criminality doesn't justify official criminality. The lack of values by Al-Shabaab that meet up with our expectations doesn't mean we go and now overhaul our entire constitution to almost be that constitution which Al-Shabaab implements. So I think that kind of a situation is extremely unfortunate, and right now the media was totally on the side of government, even to a point where you've heard me say it here severally, embedded. You know, you give a headline to unqualified reports by Major Chirchir on how there is an incursion and how much heavy losses you have instilled on Al-Shabaab and stuff like that. Without any verification, you paste it as headline. The media is also now, you know, getting into a defense line. I've seen the media owners giving probably their hardest statement since Jubilee came to power, saying this is a derogation and period. Your editorials have pointed fingers. So now they've polarized the entire space. And I hope come as we get out of this whole debate, I can tell you, Kindiki said on Monday, Thursday they will pass it. On Friday, people will be in court, Kenyans, and in the shortest possible time, the courts will quash that law.
Okay, well, Hassan Omar is speaking at a point of foresight, and based on how he's speaking, we're going to go to the courts. He anticipates a situation where the MPs will actually pass this bill. What's your view on this?
My view is that the political class in this country is once again failing us, because I agree that the issue is being politicized, which is very dangerous. There's a lot of grandstanding right now, each side taking hard positions and all that. Yet this is a very critical issue. It is real that we are facing insecurity in this country. It is very real, and we have at times and again called on the government to act decisively. I agree with the senator that yes, we must take different approaches of dealing with this. But then again, when you look at these proposals, you cannot give a blanket condemnation of these amendments. There are elements of these amendments that infringe on the Constitution, that derogate the whole liberties that have been so painstakingly achieved by this country. We know the history from which we come from, yes. But then again, what I'm calling on is that I will wish that we take this issue off the political platform and, the so-called tyranny of numbers, and look at it objectively.
But how do we do that, Sudi?
The political class.
But you're saying...
You see, let me take it... Yes, let me tell you something. The president on Jamhuri Day, while emphasizing the importance of this law, he also mentioned a very important point that I would have wished, his soldiers on the ground to also pick and say, if there are any contentious issues, if there are any problems, then propose them. Let's have them removed. I thought that should have been the tone that should have been picked and then expounded. Now the problem we're having is that once he said that, the following day, he seemed to have negated the whole thing by again coming in so hard to insist on the importance of this bill to be passed and all that. But what we need to do is that if everybody had really looked at what the president said and said, if there are any contentious issues, and he used Kiswahili, which everybody understood, that if there are any contentious issues, then let us look at them and have them removed. The truth is that there are a number of proposals in these amendments that really go to the core of dealing with insecurity, of dealing with radicalization, of dealing with terrorism as such. There are very many proposals that have been long overdue in this amendment. What somebody needs to tell the Kenyans is that, first of all, the amendments are big. It's a 90-page document. It's a 90-page document. You cannot trash the entire document. No. Even the senator will tell you that no, there are a number of proposals in these amendments that have been long overdue.
Okay, so why don't we cross to Hassan, who is now armed with documents saying you hold the Constitution, is it?
That's not the Constitution, this is the amendment.
The amendment bill, okay.
It's a 90-page document.
So a lot of Kenyans obviously may not even have had a chance to go through it, let alone even understand the issues. And yet today is their last day to contribute. Is that fair?
I think that's the whole element I had also some authors or some constitutional lawyers talk about, that limiting public participation is itself a ground for rendering the bill, the constitutionality of the bill, or the illegality of the bill. You know, this is one of the most poorly drafted laws that we have ever come across. CIC has always made recommendations, like many other stakeholders, to some of the laws that are currently before either House of Parliament, either the Senate or the National Assembly. This is a 26-page document. This is by the CIC. I requested for a copy of it. The law starts, the travesty is from page 1. You just open page 1, you start realizing that there is a real catastrophe in this country. Article 4, amending the Public Order Act, saying the Cabinet Secretary may gazette, may notice gazette areas where times at which public meetings, gatherings, or public processions may be held. Totally nothing to do with counterterrorism. This is just people who are so sad that we are in a democratic country. In fact, from day one, if you listen to some of the Jubilee actors, they kept saying how there's too much freedom in this country. I think you've heard that perversive type of analysis by people who feel activists gave us a constitution, therefore they who are not activists need to devalue Kenya's constitution. Go to section 5. Any person who unlawfully convenes, organizes, or promotes a public rally, a public rally, for heaven's sake, commits an offense. They're punishing our very inherent freedoms of association, freedom of movement. Then you start going into some of the areas of amendment. As I agree with him, one or two of these amendments, a couple of them are quite in order, because we need these to take an inventory about, in terms of in terms of landlords, in terms of car registrations and many other things. I totally agree. But sometimes if you take good water and put a little bit of poison, it makes the water poisonous in its entirety. So this is a bad intention. This bill is a bad intention. It shows you the extent. In fact, even the amendments do not matter to me. We will do the amendments at some point, but it actually shows you the psyche in Jubilee's mind in terms of how they want to misgovern this country. And therefore, then you see, then you start coming to these kinds of clauses, which I find that this is what we are talking about, amendments to the Constitution through the back door. The article, for instance, 18 says, 36A, which you insert, says, pursuant to Article 49(1) F and G of the Constitution, a police officer shall present a person who has been arrested in court within 24 hours after being arrested. That's the Constitution. Then the amendment to the Constitution through the back door is Article 2. Notwithstanding subsection 1. They are not telling you that that subsection 1 is a fundamental, is an article of the Constitution. Then they say, if a police officer has reasonable ground to believe, turning Kenya into literally a police state. Then they go, and then it is, and this is a pattern that follows through every other place, pursuant to article, for instance, that's now again Article 19, Section 19, 52J of the Constitution. Yeah, the prosecution shall mandatory inform the accused person in advance of the evidence that the prosecution intends to rely on, and ensure that the accused person has reasonable access to that evidence. And this accused person is not saying a terror accused person, saying every accused person, meaning if I wanted today to charge you with being an enemy of the state, I could easily come to KTN Standard Group and say they were about to publish some kind of an Al Jazeera documentary which will have challenged the security of the state. Okay, and so therefore, then now comes, they decide to amend the Constitution. 2 now, the prosecution may not disclose. They are challenging the constitutional provision by amending a constitution through an act of parliament, and this cuts across the entirety of this bill that's all proposed. Okay, so allow me to get in through there, because there's a story actually in the Standard newspaper. Think about Kenya's safety and past security bill. This is what Ruto is telling MPs. Think about Kenya's security. And there's a guy on Twitter here. His name is Jemo Morioki. He says, I'd rather face aggression from my own government than aggression from terrorist groups. Freedom is not free. Pass the bill. So my question to you, Sudi, is are we playing up
Are we playing on people's fears too much, trying to manipulate them into passing something which, as Hassan Omar has said, is not well intended?
First of all, probably one thing I also need to mention is that some of those amendments were even unnecessary, because like the issue that he has been talking about on the issue of bail, the Constitution itself has already made that provision. When you look at Article 49(1)(h), it says that, Article 49 says an arrested person has the right, then H says, to be released on bond or bail on reasonable conditions, pending a charge or trial, unless there are compelling reasons not to be released. The Constitution has already made that provision. There's no point of even belaboring it. It's already mentioned that, it's already given them. I know it has tried to bring that limitation to grant of bail. And I think that was even sufficient. There was no need of going to the amendments. But then, what I'm saying is that, Edith, we are coming from the background of a draconian kind of leadership in this country. It's a reality that we have come from the dark days, as the senator will mention to you, that we are coming from the dark days, and people are apprehensive of any laws that will seem to be giving too much power to the state. And again, like he has said, some of these amendments have not gone specifically to deal with, if there are suspects, to be specific on which kind of suspects we're talking about, which means that anybody could be arrested even for political reasons and actually be held unreasonably. And I agree with him on that, that we need to rethink around the amendments and try to home in more on suspects who have been clearly arrested on grounds of acts of terrorism, and not just blanket provisions that will then go to, probably can be used by state. And state has, in the past, especially the past regimes, have proved to actually be very good at using such excuses, especially to deal with political dissident, for instance.
I like that word. You said excuses, and a lot of people have drawn parallels between this bill and the Patriots Act in America. Are we seeing a similar situation where the government is sort of using the idea of fear to pass oppressive laws?
The language of autarchs, any autarky, any authoritarianism, is the language of fear and emotions. And what's the Constitution?
It's a very strong statement you're making.
Every constitution insulates itself from the emotions. You see, we will want to beat up people who we think are transgressing the boundaries and stripping women in broad daylight. But the Constitution says we need to subject them, because of our civilized character as a nation, subject them to the due processes. And the presumption of innocence is an ideal that the Constitution holds very dearly. And therefore, I think if you look at some people like Muriuki, they need to stop thinking that Uhuru Kenyatta is in government, stop being natives and be Kenyans. And that's the kind of issues, because the people who struggle for this Constitution are that Putin and the Kenyan people promulgated these values. I saw this very important phrase by Benjamin Franklin, former US president. They say that those who will sacrifice liberties for a temporary assurance around security deserve neither liberty nor security. You saw that, and everybody has held very dearly to it. These types of people, including William Ruto, are the biggest threat to our country's liberty.
So let me get this right. Are you suggesting that if by passing this bill, if we pass this bill, Kenya and essentially the Jubilee government will be autocratic, or will be employing autocratic tactics?
It has given them enough of legal loopholes to be able to now, infringe on your communication, infringe on your freedoms as a media. In fact, one I find very colorless. We've just been talking about how Uhuru and Ruto should not be subjected to foreign courts, how we have issues against foreign jurisdictions. Every principal responsibility of every country is to defend its people. Here you're amending the extradition laws to say where the court is satisfied about the authenticity of the warrant, authenticity. That if this warrant is issued in an American court, a German court, whatever court, by a proper authority of a foreign country, including the ICC for that matter, the court shall proceed to issue a warrant of surrender without holding proceedings as specified under Article 7. How do you oust your very inherent powers to defend your citizens. The very judicious process of how you of extradition, including mutual legal assistance.
Okay.
So I think what happens is, so here we want to validate renditions, because you say, you've seen there are certain Kenyans we have rendered without the due processes of the law, and I mean, it's endless. You know, targeting, putting a ceiling on our capacity to in terms of our refugee capacity. Refugees don't choose at what time to flee a country. You know, and I can tell you for a fact, we've had these refugees during Moi's era, during Kibaki's era. The problems is not the prevalence of the refugees, it's the policies any government decides to pursue. Moi pursued a strategy of neutrality. Moi ensured that Kenya was had the highest moral standing, moral being in quotes, highest moral standing. We hosted the Somali peace talks, we hosted the South Sudanese peace talks. We were the bastion of peace and stability, and we imported these values to the region. But then we decided to become warmongers. We started to be some, you know, aka George Bush type of people who hang on to guns and religion. So becoming fanatical in terms of how you rally national psyche through wars. That's what I call fascism. Yeah, fascism is always pitted against what is called liberalism. Liberalism is the kind of constitution we have, the values. You promote constitutional values, harmony, cohesion. Human rights, rule of law. That's what is. These are the kind of material differences. But on one side, the president is telling you, we have an enemy. We have an enemy. We are at war. But the liberal agenda is, we have a common challenge, and that challenge must be met with resistance and the will of our values. We must, you know, and those are the kinds of differentials in terms of even the jargon and the rhetoric.
All right, so Hassan Omar has looked at the details, including language. But is it all bad? I know I hear you saying repeatedly there are sections of this bill which are not all bad. And today we are seeing again in the papers, page 12 of the Standard newspaper, Kimayo is saying that 80% of terror attacks were actually foiled. So are we so desperately hoping that this bill will cure all our ailments, or do we already have things that are working?
There are things that are working. Again, like I've always said, the law in itself cannot cure ineptitudes in our government operations and inefficiencies. But the truth of the matter is that there are a number of provisions in this draft amendments that are very, very good. For instance, we have all along been having cases of actually some extremist statements, and some of them are just public, that are made in public. We've had clips of people actually issuing radical statements and saying, yeah, they should be killed and all that. Yeah. So we have had such cases, and there has been no clear law as to how such people can be dealt with. We have had cases of mosques being raided in the coast, and actually explosives or grenades and all that been found there. There is no clear law to deal with such situations, or whether those people can be prosecuted and what they stand and all that. So there are a number of provisions. There is a provision on the issue of registration of persons, and we've had situations where we're being told that some of these cases, some of these fellows have actually been having national registration, IDs and all that. So in fact, I will propose that some of these should be amended to be much stronger, because they only talked about the ID, if there's been fraudulent acquisition of an ID card, then it should be removed. You know, the fellow should be stripped of the ID and all that. But then it should go further and say that even public officials, even those registration officials who have been found having registered, been part of the fraud, should be charged for that. Then, just before I go on, so we're talking about one. There are those cases of somebody being found with those material. We've had cases of people training, radicalization trainings and all that happening within our jurisdiction. Such fellows, yes, it should be criminalized. You know, sometimes, and Senator will tell you that sometimes the law is also deterrent. It's also important that you put some laws that are actually going to be deterrent. However, with remaining within the confines of the Constitution.
Okay, let me introduce that aspect of radicalization, which you have brought up so strongly. NCIC is said to set up a committee in radicalization hotspots, is what they're calling it. And Hassan, I know you spoke about this very strongly over the weekend. And the question to you is, because we already have other commissions, other departments, other agencies dealing with smaller issues, do we really need this bill?
You know, I differ with Sudi to that extent, where there are quite a number of legal practitioners who believe that it's not the inadequacy of laws. The laws are there. You know precisely what to charge somebody who you find with explosives. And these are allegations, my brother. And none of these allegations has been tested and proven in a court of law. So we take some of these slanderous remarks made by the police with a pinch of salt. So that said and done, the police, you know, even it's been a strategy. Even the whole time I was in the human rights fraternity, they will kill you and say, you see, we found these guys with explosives. This was a Mungeke who was about to commit a crime. And the gullibility of the Kenyan mind. In fact, we should even be telling the media to exercise a certain level of social responsibility when it comes to reporting the police official lines or statements. So I think what happens is it's not the inadequacy of laws. We don't mind when somebody says you deregister someone when there's a fraudulent acquisition, but you do not give the registrar of persons that discretion to deregister people en masse, because what is going to happen, these will be arbitrary kinds of decisions. So therefore, I think we need to, you do not, as I agree with Ahmed Nasser, you do not write laws that are specifically targeted to certain regions or certain groups of people. It is obvious they're targeting, for instance, the Somali. We have had this whole phobia or this whole, you know, xenophobic almost towards the Somali people. We've built a xenophobic kind of Kenyan psyche. But then now coming to the issue of radicalization. Every time, in fact, if you do recall, the radicalization, things have turned from bad to worse. The fact that, in fact, this problem was smaller some years back. And I think if you look at some of the UN reports, including those people who've been radicalized or who've taken to the ranks of the Shabab or other radical groups, they will tell you the majority of them said, in excess, I think, of 70–80%, said that they were forced into radicalization by the government's actions in terms of that perception that, you know, our religion, our community is being targeted. There's no room for justice, no room for equity, no room for constitutionalism. So that's why we need to fight that narrative. Okay. So you don't arrogate the constitution. So what has happened is the government needed to change strategy like yesterday. Before we get into that strategy, let me just pick on a point that you've just brought up. The way security agencies deal with security problems. Inspire, Engage, Motivate on Twitter says, don't we have to address ambivalence, incompetence, corruption, etc. in security sector and reform them ASAP? So Hassan Omar is saying we don't have a shortage of laws, but we have systemic issues that we haven't dealt with. How do we address that? I agree with that. I agree with that, and again, probably some of these amendments will have even been targeted more on dealing with errant security agencies, rather than probably putting pressure on the public and arrogating on their rights and all that. But then again, first of all, allow me to really differ with my learned senior when he says that there's been a xenophobic kind of approach towards the Somalis. I think I disagree. Kenya has been and still remains very accommodative. We are living with these people very well. When you go to Eastleigh, really, if we were having daily raids in Eastleigh, then I will understand. We have had cases where we're saying, really, doesn't the government understand that these people are living in Eastleigh and those cases are coming from there? We've not had any arbitrary raids there and all that. There was, it was very clear when they were trying to identify the elements. You know, let's be very clear on this. We have had cases of terror, which has actually involved even people other than from the Somali community. We have had those cases. We've realized that radicalization is just targeting all Kenyans and not specifically the Somali. But coming back to what you have said, I say that is also a reality that
we need to deal with the issue of corruption and the issue of inefficiencies in our systems.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then that brings us to the conversation Hassan was trying to address earlier, strategy.
Yes.
And do you think our strategy, specifically in radicalization or addressing radicalization of youth, is failing? And I know you're suggesting rehabilitation and possibly economic empowerment.
Yeah, but first and foremost, again, you see, you don't slap me very hard and told me, I didn't slap you. It was a pat on the back. That's what you're saying. The Somali community believes it is, you know, it's undeniable. You do not deny facts. You know, the human rights group have cautioned about the profiling of the Somali community, subjecting them to almost, you know, blanket treatment. That's what is called xenophobia.
Okay.
It doesn't necessarily mean you just hate them. It is the treatments you call them even by virtue of law. But then to come back to that point again, let me be honest, it is not only the incompetence of certain security agencies, and I make a very strong statement again. I believe myself that Uhuru and Ruto lack the competence to lead this country. And that competence is therefore trickling down. You see, you come with no clear vision of the country. The only vision you have, you know, your tribe and whatever, your numbers is not enough qualification to make you leaders of a nation. You need to have a certain you know, value system, a certain agenda. So the only thing they have been doing very meticulously is procurement processes.
Before we continue about the competence or lack thereof of our current leadership, I just want to draw your attention to the news alert which you're seeing on your screens right now. This is actually an ongoing story. This is a siege happening in Sydney, Australia. The pictures you're seeing on your screens coming from CNN, who we are affiliates of. 5 hours now, counting down, 13 people have been held hostage in a cafe, and according to the CNN reports, their hands have been seen pressed against the glass, so they're obviously under duress. And apparently there have been reports of banners with Islamic writing suggesting that it could be the work of extremists, but of course these are details which are continuing to unfold. And as we are reporting the details as they emerge, and obviously we'll be looking to see if any developments do come up. So the issue of terrorism, radicalization, we are seeing very global. And Hassan Omar is saying the leaders we have in our country today are not qualified to deal with such a great issue, such problems.
Yeah, but Hassan Omar is a leader, and
but he's saying specifically the president and the deputy president.
I may not want to agree with him or disagree with him, but then again, I will want to also question even the same Omar and Code, and tell them that, you know, what you need are, if Code had come out very clearly and said, look here, instead of these amendments, this is what should have been done. This is what, if there are any changes to these amendments, please put it this way, put it this way, put it this way. Give us your alternative. What I don't like in this country is, one is you take the political position. Let us hit these guys and all that. You do not provide the alternative. What we lack in this country is that. Very alternative provisions. Look, in our instance, if we were the ones, this is what we'll have done. 1, 2, 3, 4. Because that you show that, yes, we can actually, as the members of the public, can see and say, look at this. If Code was in power, this is how we will have gone. And now that Jubilee is in power, this is how they have gone.
Does that work? Because, I mean, the whole premise of elections is that is a hypothetical situation that you place to the public and say, we are able to do 1, 2, 3 things to you. And Code did the exact same thing. And so we picked, or rather 6 million people picked what they thought was the best hypothesis. So what is to say that what he is saying is not true?
What I'm saying is that he's talking about, let's come specifically. I'm being very specific here. When you come down to like these issues of radicalization and all that, let us see the alternative proposals. Let us see if the amendments, what kind of laws will have been put in place. Let us see what sort of, you know, one, I will want to disagree if Code just comes and says this thing should be trashed. That's wrong.
So they should come with alternatives.
They should come with alternatives. They should come with the specific changes that should be made to this law.
Hassan,
what happened that day?
Let me
finish. Let me finish this, Edith. What happened in Parliament the other day is what I have issues with. Because everybody was standing up and going sensational about the whole thing without giving answer. And no wonder they ended up in blows. because they became unreasonable, unruly. No one was giving reasons. No one was giving alternatives. No one was saying, no, look here, let us pick out this particular amendment and make it this way. Let us do away with this amendment because of this reason and then replace it with this, or just do away with it completely.
Okay, so let me give Hassan a chance to respond to that.
I pray that you stay where you are, because you become a very rhetorical, pontifical politician who has no solutions. I've just heard you speak. My God, it's like you're not just watching the same TV. You do not understand the process of Parliament, what first reading means, what second reading means. You have not been listening. I've been going on almost on specifics here. He's not had any of that specifics. He did not appreciate that this bill was just brought into Parliament on a Tuesday evening. We put it to the first reading, based on the tyrannical element where Jubilee controls the National Assembly almost almost with overwhelming majority, and therefore immediately court had to do a response. When Ababu, when Badi, when Junaid, when Abdikadir rose to speak, they actually pointed out the specific sections of the bill that they are not going to oppose and that they think have issues. And quite a number of the court legislators acknowledge the fact that we need to fight terrorism, but we need to fight it within the realm of the rule of law. And I think right now the opposition papers that we are making reference to, it does not think this is a position that offers an alternative to this bill. So I don't know. I mean, yeah, but CIC advises us. Yeah, and I have other positions prepared by Professor Yashgai, Orio Kolo, Mwangi. I have positions prepared by Human Rights Watch, positions prepared by Amnesty International. I've sifted through them. When I'm talking about an alternative. For heaven's sake, don't make it a fashionable thing to bash politicians. Some of us did come there with a specific agenda, and we pursue it almost religiously.
Thank you.
So that's said and done. As you put up, as we move ahead, I think I will share to that extent where we've spoken for the last almost 5-6 months internally within the court about an alternative agenda. And I remember Raila Odinga offering the dialogue concept together with other luminaries, including Kalonzo Musyoka and Wetangula, the dialogue element. And therefore, to Uhuru, so that we can discuss part of the thematic areas that bedevil the country, the security being one of it. And there's been an internal discussion about what is the opposition agenda in responding to an alternative security strategy or plan. And I think it's so, also the appreciation is that some of these strategies, in fact, the Kenyan constitution is so lengthy, it is so detailed, almost sometimes specific to the very last. Tells you what a security strategy is all about. Article 238, what are the accountabilities of national security? How shall be its diverse mix? How will we be able to manage the framework of the delicate framework around the human rights and the rule of law? So I think even the Constitution itself speaks so much in terms of what the strategy is or the alternative strategy is. And what CORD is saying, sometimes oppositions are caught off guard, and that I must accept. This bill was bundled into Parliament last week. The baby CORD must now also be proactive. I wish we had an intelligence who could know that Asman Kamama was going to bring a very draconian bill and forewarn. But unfortunately, that's the irony that governments, or through committee chairs, bring in bills that then become the subject of debate in the House.
Okay, I think you've sufficiently answered that question. Before we wind up this session, I'd like to look at some of the issues that we're likely to see develop this week. Homa Bay, it's being described as what would be a litmus test on the unity of ODM. That's according to the Star newspaper this morning. I don't know what you think about this. Do you think it will be that earth-shattering, depending on who is picked to?
I think, my God, I think this political competition, my God, I mean, Star. Women say da, star da. So I mean, I had to battle it out with some of my best camaraderie within the ODM, CORD framework. People who helped me through life included, like Kajembe, who was a personal friend to my own father. So that's kind of how political competitions manifest. And I personally had hoped that I would play a very key role in supporting a candidate or two. But I know literally almost all of them at a personal level. Moses Mkajwang's brother was my junior in university. I literally campaigned at some point with him for the post of Secretary General of Moi University Student Organization. Personal link. Silas Jekakimba is not only a personal friend, our wives are personal friends. You know, Karoli Omondi and Engineer Okundi. That list is endless about the personal connection. So what you're saying is this is an in-house family fight or contest. So we let it happen. So once the contest is over after today, which we think we will have an ODM nominee, I think then that's where we will now be able to venture out and say we support this candidate. But everybody...
I mean, looking at ODM's timeline, perhaps 5 years from now, will this be one of those markers that we're like, okay, this was really, as a star has put it, a litmus test for the unity of the party, especially coming after the NDC?
I will agree with it start to this extent. Maybe what the point they're trying to make. That ODM has this perception or reality that it skews its nomination processes, that there is the outcome is usually out of what is the popular feeling, and it has happened several times. I was one of those who was viciously mistreated within the ODM purview.
Well, there's no one here to respond.
No, it's empirical, and I moved to Wiper Party. I could have been an ODM senator. But when the processes internally aged us out, we went into the Wiper Party, and within the Wiper Party, I still became senator. So I think what we need to do is the litmus test is it will either boost the confidence or otherwise of ODM's capacity to conduct free, fair nominations, and therefore people feeling that they need to be in the party and can have fair room for competition within the party ranks.
I wish we had more time to get into it, but sadly we don't. So Sudi, allow me to pick one issue before we go on a break. Fatou Bensouda, this is globally now on ICC issues, but this time not targeting Kenya. She says that she has shelved her investigations in Sudan, specifically against Omar al-Bashir, for what she claims is lack of support from the Security Council in the UN. Are we seeing the ICC just crumble into pieces, or is it just a phase they're going through and we'll see them recollect themselves?
Personally, I've always argued that the ICC was a very good idea that was badly done. That has always been my position. That while the ICC had intended to really, rein in some of these errant leaders and all that, the truth is that it has fallen into the traps of international political manipulations. And what we're seeing right now is that, of course, there is the threats by the African states to pull out of ICC and all that will really go to the core of credibility of the ICC itself. And therefore, definitely the UN Security Council is quite aware of that. And if it becomes real, then definitely, of course, if success succeeds, if Africa succeeds to pull out, then of course the other countries will also want to pull out, and it will really affect it. So that's my position has always been that I don't think really the ICC's credibility is in any other doubt right now. That is tainted completely. Okay,
and Hassan, Omar, as we wind up, Kenya is now 51 years. Anything to celebrate? Anything to look forward to? We're going into the holidays. We're being told that our fuel prices could be coming down by 4 shillings.
I read a very interesting post by tweet by Gadara. He will be here, I think, in the next day or two.
Hopefully, if he's watching, this is an invitation to you, Gadara.
No, he comes for the
newsroom.
The newsroom. And he said, what kind of math is going on? The fuel prices at the international market have come down almost by 40%. So why is it coming down by 7 shillings in Kenya? So it might not necessarily be tokenism. It doesn't reflect reality. So I think what we need to do, fuel prices across the world are affected by the prices at the international market. So they come down 40%. We expect our fuel prices to come down 40%. That way then you make cost of energy higher, so therefore you increase Kenya's productivities, the cost of production will become cheaper, and many other things will take flow, and we'll have a little more money in your pocket for Christmas.
But away from the petroleum issues, do you think there's anything worth celebrating?
Oh my God, it will be dishonest for me to say that there is nothing to celebrate. But partly because of the grace of God. Not because...
I was really clinching to that positivity. I was really holding on to it.
Partly because look at us, for instance. We have an education today. You know, it was a preserve for a few people. Look at our newsrooms. Who look at our beautiful anchors, Edith and our great, legal analysts. This is all part of the progress we've made. Kenya is one of the most intellectual. I mean, has a capacity that is matched by no other country in sub-Saharan Africa in terms of its human resource, and therefore we are a great human resource. That itself is something to pride upon. We've had relative stability as a country. We've done poorly in terms of national cohesion. In fact, the best times which we could have molded a framework for national cohesion was coming out of the 2002 elections. Kibaki squandered it once again. And therefore, we hope that leaders will be able to build a country we can all pride upon and call Kenya, not these little nations that need liberation, from their demagogues. So I think that kind of a situation is there. But because we need to be hard on ourselves, we need to be very critical on ourselves. But on certain fronts, I can say we've enjoyed free speech, which is now under threat. Look what we are saying in this. My friends sometimes ask me, can you say these things in Kenya?
You're giving me sugar and pepper all in the same sentence. Look, we have freedoms, but they're being taken away from us.
And it's under threat. That's why we have the strength even as a country to defend it. That's the strength of our democracy. I know deep down you might not have an opinion, but deep down there are certain clauses you want bumped off.
I will not let you speak for me. So allow me to just wind discussion at that point.
But that point, so I think it will be dishonest for us to say that within the 51 years we don't have anything to celebrate.
Okay. Well, that's a good place to wrap up. Do you want to tell your viewers Merry Christmas? You will not be back until next year.
Yeah, I wish all Kenyans a safe Christmas, a Merry Christmas, a Happy New Year. Like President Kenyatta said, take care of yourselves, don't drink yourself and drive yourselves to death. But let's also take this as time to reflect. But more importantly, I want to invite you to Mombasa County. I think it is the bastion. This is the bastion of Christmas festivity. No, really. You always come.
I believe everything that you're saying.
I really want you guys to calm down. I don't want this stigmatization of Mombasa County to affect our performance. I think we are confident that security will be guaranteed. The county government has been very robust. We've asked some of the key leaders to, as they come in, they trickle in for Christmas, we'll be putting them on the platform to reassure people of the safety and security. So please, let's make it merry again.
Okay.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic marketing, and I like for a leader. That's very good. It is a vote of confidence from Mombasa, which has always raised those fears, and we are hoping that the international community is watching.
Yeah. The British in particular.
Yeah. So I also like to wish the entire nation a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Keep safe, but then again, keep the peace. Very critical. And I would like to wish all the entire political class all the best. And they really provide leadership to this country. That's my call. Provide leadership to this country.
Provide leadership and don't be afraid of any part of this country. That's the message from our panelists this morning. Well, we're about to take a short commercial break. That is the way it is this morning. But not before we remind you of what is happening globally. Right here in Nairobi, we're enjoying peace and stability today. But in Sydney, Australia, everyone is holding their breath. 13 people have been taken hostage in a cafe by what appears at the moment to be extremists. It's not clear, but initial reports suggest that there are banners which seem to have some form of Arabic message, which suggests that there could be religious extremists who have taken these 13 people hostage inside a Sydney cafe.